Oh, Angel, sweet, young, 22-year-old Angel Reese. You had no idea the mess you were walking into, did you? If you were older, maybe, just maybe, someone could have sat you down and said, "Hey, don't poke the Swifties." But alas, here we are, and the world of women's basketball is about to look like a Taylor Swift concert mixed with an NBA playoff brawl. You think the WNBA was ready for this? Huh, think again. The spark? Well, that was Angel's podcast, Unapologetically Angel, which was supposed to be her big moment, the one where she leveled up, went full celebrity, built her empire, and left everyone in her dust. Oh, but honey, this ain't what boosting your fame looks like. Instead, she's now public enemy #1 to the Swifties, aka Taylor Swift's devoted army of fans who will go to war for their queen. And the cherry on top, Caitlin Clark is out here just chilling, looking like a genius, while Reese watches her reputation burn. Seriously, could this get any wilder? Angel thought she was playing chess, right? She had it all figured out, or so she thought when she invited Kayla Nicole, yeah, that Kayla, Travis Kelce's ex-girlfriend, onto her podcast. Oh yeah, that Travis Kelce, the one who's now dating the literal queen of pop herself, Taylor Swift. Reese must have thought, bingo, I've got the tea, I've got the connection, I'm about to take over. Only that spotlight she wanted? It's not shining on her, it's basically a heat lamp now, and the Swifties are frying her under it. They're on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, probably even your grandma's Facebook, absolutely obliterating her. Oh man, the Swifties. In this vast universe of fandoms, there are certain groups you just don't mess with. You know, like how you don't invite Kanye to an award show without backup security. The Swifties are that kind of unmatched level of loyalty. And Angel Reese, she went and poked that beehive with a full-on stick. The second that podcast dropped, the Swifties smelled blood. To them, inviting Kelsey's ex was a direct shot at Taylor. And these fans went into full-on DEFCON 1 mode, launching a digital blitzkrieg on poor Angel. And let me tell you, Reese didn't exactly throw water on the fire. Oh no. Instead, she fanned the flames with the subtlety of a WWE wrestler, posting a picture of herself painting her nails as if to say, "I'm ready for this fight." Some was just throwing gas on the Swifties' already blazing inferno. Did no one tell her this is the same army of fans that obliterated Jake Gyllenhaal? I mean, Jake's still out here probably reading a Taylor Swift Wikipedia page to figure out where he went wrong. And John Mayer, he's basically hiding out in a witness protection program somewhere. And the Swifties didn't stop there though, because they're not just about numbers, they're about precision. They dug into Reese's past, hunting for anything to turn against her. And oh, did they strike it gold? They found an old post from Caitlin Clark. Yep, the same Caitlin who's been Reese's on-court rival, welcoming Taylor Swift to Chiefs Kingdom with open arms. Boom, just like that, Clark is suddenly their new bestie. And now the Swifties are like, Reese, who's that? Caitlin Clark is our girl now. Women's basketball just got a massive glow up, folks. Forget the drama on the court. This Swiftie Clark Reese triangle is about to take over the headlines. WNBA games are going to have more Swifties in the crowd than basketball fans, and you can bet those Eras Tour jackets are going to make courtside seats a lot more fashionable. Women's basketball isn't just interesting now, it's a full-on soap opera. Buckle up, this one's gonna be wild. It's almost comical how fast Caitlin Clark went from being just a basketball prodigy to the chosen one for the Swifties. It's like she hit the fame lottery, but instead of buying a ticket, she was just minding her own business while Angel Reese self-destructed. Talk about right place, right time. Clark was already turning heads on the court, dropping dimes and drilling deep threes like Steph Curry with better footwork. But the Swifties? Oh, they turned her from a baller into a full-blown icon. You want to talk about a fan base explosion? Clark's followers practically doubled overnight, like she was cast in a Marvel movie or something. People who thought a pick and roll was a type of sushi are now dissecting Caitlin's highlight reels like they've been hoop heads since day one. It's wild. Meanwhile, Angel Reese, she's out here dodging digital tomatoes, with Swifties dissecting her podcast like it's a crime scene. Every word she says gets twisted, every post gets torched, and the whole internet feels like it's piling on. It's like she opened Pandora's box, and instead of hope, out came Taylor Swift's army. But here's the thing, while Reese is trying to pull her career out of the social media dumpster fire, Caitlin Clark is doing the exact opposite. She's playing the long game, staying cool, and letting her jumper do all the talking. This girl could have fed the drama, leaned into the beef, thrown a little shade, but nope, not a word, just icy, focused, and locked in like the basketball cyborg she is. And that's why people adore her. Even folks who don't know a pic from a post are jumping on the Caitlin Clark hype train. streaming her highlights as if they're watching the next Taylor Swift album drop. It's not just respect, it's a movement. Let's be real, this isn't just about basketball anymore. It's about cultural power. When you have an entire fan base like the Swifties behind you, you're not just an athlete, you're a phenomenon. Caitlin Clark isn't just shifting the game on the court, she's pulling a full-on pop culture heist. Women's basketball is blowing up in ways we've never seen before. We're talking more views, more headlines, more everything. And it's not just because Caitlin can drop 40 on any given night. It's because she's riding this Swiftie-fueled rocket straight into the cultural stratosphere. Reese, meanwhile, is still wading through the muck of a scandal she never saw coming. Her social media is basically a war zone, and every move she makes is met with Swiftie scorn. She's in quicksand, and the harder she fights, the deeper she sinks. Meanwhile, Clark is out here thriving like nothing ever happened, soaking up the spotlight like a pro. And it's not even a spotlight she asked for. She's just that good. And let's be real, that's what makes this whole thing so mind-blowing. Clark isn't out here trying to be a cultural icon. She's just playing basketball, and the world's falling at her feet because of it. Suddenly, women's basketball isn't just for the hardcore fans anymore. It's a whole new arena for pop culture stans. People who never cared about sports are now locked in, watching every Clark move, dissecting every stat, and of course, dragging Reese for every misstep. The Swifties have turned Caitlin Clark into a phenomenon that transcends basketball. It's like she's become the new heroine of women's sports, and honestly, who's gonna stop her? Certainly not the WNBA. They're loving this. This isn't a shift. This is a tsunami. Women's basketball is officially on the map, not just for sports lovers, but for the entire culture. And at the center of it all, Caitlin Clark, the girl who did nothing but show up and play her game, and now she's running the whole show. If you thought Angel Reese was about to throw in the towel and quietly fade into the shadows, well, you don't know Angel Reese. Sure, her social media following might be tanking, and her DMs are probably a nightmare of Swifties hurling insults and gifs of Taylor Swift performing Shake It Off. But this girl knows how to play the game. And no, I don't just mean basketball, I mean the real game. Staying relevant, Reese isn't going to curl up in a ball and cry into her LSU jersey. Nah, she's out here leaning all the way in, embracing the villain role like she's auditioning for the next Marvel movie. The world's framing her as the antagonist in this Swiftie basketball showdown. Fine, she's gonna milk that for all it's worth. Controversy equals clicks, and clicks equal headlines. And if there's one thing Reese knows, it's how to keep her name in those headlines. So while Caitlin Clark is over there sitting on her newfound throne, soaking up the love from her Swiftie-backed fan base, Reese is busy turning herself into the league's bad girl, the one you love to hate. And let's not pretend this isn't reshaping women's basketball right before our eye. The Swifties, of all people, are now a major player in the sport's popularity. Think about it. This isn't just about game stats anymore. This is about pop culture colliding head-on with sports in a way that's never happened before. Players like Clark are being lifted up as cultural icons, while the Swiftie army is keeping the conversation going with every tweet, TikTok, and Instagram post. Love Reese or hate her, you're talking about her, and that's exactly what she wants. Reese might be down, but don't count her out. This is the start of something much bigger, a new era of women's basketball, one driven as much by social media warfare as by actual play on the court. And guess what? Reese is still in the fight. When Angel Reese thought she could handle the backlash, she was probably imagining a few snarky comments, maybe some shade throwing from the Swifties. What she wasn't ready for? A full-on digital hurricane. What started as just another podcast episode, one that she figured would boost her profile and maybe stir the pot a little, quickly turned into something that nobody, not even Reese with all her swagger, could have predicted. The Swifties didn't just get mad, they went scorched earth. Every post, every word, every emoji Reese put out there was met with an army of Swifties ready to break down her every move with the precision of a forensic team. But let's not forget who we're dealing with here. Angel Reese isn't backing down from a bunch of keyboard warriors. She's never been one to shy away from a fight, and she wasn't about to start now. So what did she do? She doubled down, she kept posting, she stayed defiant. You think you can intimidate me? That's what every post screamed, complete with her signature sass and that I don't care attitude. The problem? The Swifties weren't backing down either. If anything, they saw her resistance as fuel for the fire, and now the whole situation had spiraled into something so much bigger than basketball or even a petty podcast feud. Caitlin Clark, meanwhile, was just out here winning, both on and off the court. She didn't have to say a word. The Swifties were doing all the PR work for her, painting her as the humble, talented underdog who never asked to be a part of this mess, but who's now reaping all the rewards. Every day, Clark's follower count skyrocketed, and her highlights became must-see content. People were gushing over her game, calling her a role model, a breath of fresh air, the anti-heroine who just happened to end up on the right side of this pop culture collision. The narrative couldn't be clearer. Clark was the hero, the golden girl of basketball, with Swifties singing her praises. And Reese, she's been cast as the villain, the one who dared to mess with Queen Taylor's kingdom, and now she's paying the price. But let's be real, even villains have their fans, and Reese knows exactly what she's doing. She's not trying to win over the Swifties anymore. She's staking her claim as the one player willing to stand up to them, willing to play the role of the rebel in a world full of polished, media-friendly stars. Women's basketball hasn't just reached a tipping point, it's straight up teetering on the edge of a cultural revolution. The game's no longer just about the game, it's about social media, pop culture, and fandom wars. And in this new reality, every tweet, every post, every highlight has the power to turn a player into a villain or a hero. And right now, Caitlin Clark is basking in the glow, while Angel Reese is staring down the storm, refusing to back down. The drama isn't over. If anything, it's just getting started. What started as a heated, headline-grabbing rivalry between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark was now spiraling into something much darker. The playful trash talk and competitive tension that initially drove interest in women's basketball had taken a hard left turn. Swifties, once thought to be just a passionate fan base, were now crossing the line, turning the rivalry into something toxic and dangerously personal. The whispers started small, rumors that some of Clark's more fanatical supporters were harassing Reese, but it didn't stop there. Reese went public with shocking accusations. Some of these so-called fans were using AI-generated fake nude photos of her, sending them to her family and posting them across social media. It was no longer just about basketball. It wasn't even about the Swifties anymore. This was a personal attack, a calculated effort to destroy her reputation and peace of mind. To make matters worse, Reese pointed out the racial undertones of the harassment, exposing the ugliness that often hides behind internet anonymity. Through it all, Caitlin Clark kept her head down, choosing silence over engagement, but that silence only amplified the drama for Reese, who was now fighting not just to clear her name, but to protect herself from an onslaught of digital abuse. What had once been a court rivalry had morphed into a cultural battleground, with Reese stuck in the middle, carrying the weight of more than just a competitive feud. As Reese fought her personal war, Caitlin Clark was unknowingly benefiting from the chaos. Her meteoric rise wasn't just about her skill, though let's be real, she was dropping buckets like no one else in women's basketball. The real fuel behind her celebrity, the massive cultural crossover between the sports world and the Swiftie empire. Thanks to the Swifties, Clark had gone from an emerging basketball star to household name status practically overnight, and people who couldn't tell a layup from a lob were suddenly tuning in just to see her play. Clark wasn't just winning games, she was winning hearts and minds with her quiet focus and undeniable talent. Meanwhile, Reese, despite being every bit the athlete Clark was, found herself buried under the weight of controversy. The spotlight once shared now seemed to shine squarely on Clark, but don't count Reese out just yet. She knew how the game worked, both on the court and in the world of social media. In an era where attention is currency, Reese was still cashing in, controversy be damned. Good or bad, her name was on everyone's lips, and as long as people were talking, she had leverage. Chapter 9, The New Normal. The dust may have settled, but the landscape of women's basketball would never be the same. Caitlin Clark had emerged not just as a basketball star, but as a pop culture sensation, riding the wave of Swiftie support to heights no one could have predicted. She wasn't just an athlete anymore, she was a symbol, a phenomenon transcending the sport itself. In this new era, women's basketball was drawing in fans from all walks of life, not just the diehards. And then there was Angel Reese, the defiant, unbreakable figure who refused to crumble under the weight of online vitriol. Sure, her public image had taken some hits, but in an age where playing the villain could be just as profitable as being the hero, Reese had found her own power. She remained unapologetically herself, embracing her role as the controversial lightning rod in this evolving saga. So what's next for these two titans? One thing's for sure, the rivalry between Reese and Clark is just getting started, and it's no longer confined to the hardwood. Social media, pop culture, and fan power are the new forces shaping the game, and Reese and Clark are at the center of it all, ushering women's basketball into its wildest chapter yet. The future of women's basketball now rests on the shoulders of these two players. Caitlin Clark, with her Swiftie-fueled rise to fame, is set to dominate both the sport and the cultural conversation. Her humility, focus, and raw talent have endeared her to millions, turning her into an unstoppable force both on and off the court. Angel Reese, on the other hand, is playing a different game. She's using controversy to keep her name in the spotlight, embracing the role of the villain in this fan-driven narrative. She may have lost the favor of the Swifties, but she's betting that staying in the headlines, no matter the reason, will keep her relevant. As the world watches, these two athletes are reshaping what it means to be a sports star in the social media age. And while the court may be their battleground, it's the fans who are driving this new era of fame. In the end, this rivalry may not just define their careers, it could define the future of women's basketball. Angel Reese probably thought she was about to set the world on fire when she launched her podcast, Unapologetically Angel. And honestly, she kinda did, but not in the way she expected. Bringing Kayla Nicole, Travis Kelce's ex, onto the show? Yeah, she was definitely going for the shock value, thinking that a little drama around Kelce's new flame, oh, you know, Taylor Swift, would generate some buzz. Well, she got the buzz, alright, more like a full-blown hornet's nest, because the Swifties, Taylor Swift's ultra-loyal fan base, don't play around. Reese figured she'd get some attention, maybe a few headlines, but what she didn't anticipate was the sheer fury of the Swiftie army. The second the podcast episode dropped, the Swifties pounced, treating it like Reese had just declared war on their queen. Talking about Kelce with his ex. Oh, that hit way too close to home for Swift's fans, who saw this as a thinly veiled swipe at their idol's relationship. And let's be honest, Swifties have built an entire career out of protecting Taylor from the tiniest slights, so naturally, they went full detective mode, dissecting every frame of the podcast, every line, and turning the whole thing into a battle. And Reese, she thought she could handle it. She posted a picture of herself coolly painting her nails, like she was ready for the storm. But what she didn't realize, this wasn't a little rain shower. This was a Swiftie hurricane. Tough as she acted, Reese was about to find out just how relentless that fan base can be. As if things weren't already spinning out of control, the Swifties, being the social media sleuths that they are, decided to dig a little deeper into Angel Reese's online footprint. And boy, did they strike gold. Buried in Reese's social media past was an unexpected nugget, an old post from none other than her on-court rival Caitlin Clark, welcoming Taylor Swift to Chiefs Kingdom. For the Swifties, this was like finding the Holy Grail. Clark had unknowingly positioned herself as the perfect ally for the Swiftie Nation. She wasn't just a baller anymore, she was their new basketball queen. That single post showed Clark embracing the Swiftie universe, and that's all it took. The Swifties immediately shifted their allegiance, flooding social media with support for Clark, proclaiming her the hero they didn't know they needed in the blink of an eye. Caitlin Clark went from being just a basketball star to a pop culture darling, with one of the most passionate fan bases in the world backing her. Meanwhile, Angel Reese found herself further isolated. What had started as a fiery but mostly friendly rivalry on the court had now become an all-out cultural war. Clark was elevated to hero status, while Reese, she was left holding the bag as the villain, trapped in the crossfire. The Swifties and Clark supporters formed one of the largest, most formidable fan alliances in women's basketball history, and they were out to make sure Reese knew exactly who was running the show. The game had changed. This wasn't just a rivalry anymore. It was a full-scale battle, with Swifties on one side and Reese, defiant as ever, on the other. When the Swifties rallied behind Caitlin Clark, the WNBA couldn't ignore it any longer. This wasn't just another fan base casually supporting a player. This was the Swifties, one of the most relentless, organized, and loudest groups out there. Every passing second saw more of them becoming diehard Clark fans, flooding social media with praise for her every shot, assist, and victory. Meanwhile, Angel Reese, the same Reese who confidently waved Clark off with the infamous "you can't see me" hand gesture during the NCAA championship, was now feeling the full heat of this newfound superfan alliance. It was like poking a bear, only to realize it had an entire army behind it. Suddenly, that playful taunt had consequences Reese never saw coming. This Swiftie-Clark union was shaking up women's basketball in ways no one had predicted. The sport had always struggled for mainstream attention, but now, the Swifties had entered the chat and they weren't playing around. The fan base that sent Jake Gyllenhaal running for cover was now catapulting Clark into a whole new realm of fame, leaving Reese stuck trying to dodge the shrapnel in this wild new landscape. This was no longer just about basketball. It had evolved into a full-on cultural war.
grew up playing the basketball with the boys, so like it's always been physical and feisty, and like that's what it is, and you got to find a way to hold your own.
What started as a rivalry between two elite athletes had now become a battleground for social media supremacy, fandom pride, and personal identity. The Swifties, once content with guarding Taylor Swift's honor, had now shifted their energy to boosting Caitlin Clark, and they weren't going anywhere. Clark's calm, focused demeanor on the court stood in stark contrast to Angel Reese's unapologetic, in-your-face style. Fans were picking sides faster than they could hit follow on Instagram. Clark's supporters praised her quiet excellence, while Reese's brash personality became an easy target for criticism. The Swifties, never once to back down from a fight, were now fully engaged, dragging Reese's podcast and mocking her every move. This wasn't about stats anymore. This was about public perception. Millions of fans from all corners of the internet had mobilized, and Reese found herself at the center of it all, taking hits from every direction. The impact of the Swiftie-Clark alliance was immediate and massive. Clark's social media accounts saw a meteoric rise in followers, with each new fan eager to crown her the queen of basketball. The Swifties were even dubbing her Taylor Swift in sneakers, which only fueled the hype. Suddenly, women's basketball had a pop culture crossover event it didn't know it needed. For Angel Reese, however, the story was much different. Her social media accounts were under siege, with negative comments pouring in, making it nearly impossible for her to escape the Swiftie wrath. Reese, who had built her brand on being bold and unapologetic, was now staring down the darkest storm she'd ever faced. This wasn't just backlash over a podcast. This was a fight for her reputation, and every post seemed to dig her deeper into the hole. Clark was being lifted to icon status, while Reese was scrambling to keep her footing. The battle was as much about public image as it was about basketball, and right now the Swifties were writing the script. Angel Reese knew how to play the social media game, but even she was starting to realize she might be in over her head. Every time she tried to reclaim the narrative, the Swifties were there to shut her down. Defiant as always, she kept posting, kept pushing back, but the more she fought, the harder the Swifties came at her. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark, she didn't have to say a word. Her quiet dominance on the court was doing all the talking for her. Clark didn't need to wade into the social media drama. Her fans were already winning that battle for her. As Clark continued to rake in victories, both on and off the court, her fan base grew louder and more unified. Reese, on the other hand, was left to fend for herself. What had once been a competitive rivalry had turned into a full-blown clash of cultures, with fans from both sides stirring the pot. But while Reese was taking all the punches, Clark was floating above it all, letting her game speak louder than any tweet ever could. The rivalry between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark was no longer just a storyline in the world of basketball. It was reshaping the entire sport. With the Swifties on her side, Clark had transcended basketball, becoming a cultural icon with one of the most powerful fan bases in the world backing her. She wasn't just a basketball player anymore, she was a symbol, someone fans wanted to see win in every sense of the word. Reese, meanwhile, was facing a different kind of pressure. The Swifties were relentless, and no matter how hard she tried to fight back, they just kept coming. Her attempts to reclaim control over her narrative were met with more and more resistance, making it clear that this wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was a battle for relevance, and Reese was fighting an uphill struggle to stay in the game. What started as an on-court rivalry between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese had now become something so much bigger. This wasn't about points or assists, it was about winning the hearts and minds of the fans. And in this new era of sports fandom, Clark was coming out on top. But don't count Reese out just yet. She knew how to stay relevant, even if it meant embracing the role of the villain. In today's media landscape, attention is everything, and Reese wasn't about to let the Swifties push her out of the spotlight. She might be taking the heat now, but she was determined to keep her name in the headlines, no matter what. As the dust settled on this latest chapter of their rivalry, one thing was clear: the world of women's basketball had been changed forever. Caitlin Clark had ascended to superstardom, powered by the Swifties, while Angel Reese was fighting to maintain her spot in the limelight. Both players were carving their own paths, and while their rivalry had taken on a life of its own, it had brought more attention to women's basketball than ever before. The fans had chosen sides, the culture had shifted, and the sport was better for it. In the end, the real winner wasn't Clark or Reese, it was women's basketball. Fans from every corner of the world were now paying attention, tuning in to watch these two athletes go head-to-head as the next chapter in their rivalry continued to unfold. In the end, the rivalry between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark became bigger than either of them could have imagined. What started as a battle on the court evolved into a clash of cultures, fandoms, and social media forces. Caitlin Clark emerged as a global superstar, propelled by the unwavering loyalty of the Swifties. Meanwhile, Angel Reese, ever defiant, embraced her role as the unapologetic villain, refusing to be silenced or sidelined. But beyond the drama, both athletes changed the face of women's basketball forever. Their rivalry brought unprecedented attention to the sport, drawing in fans who never cared about basketball until this moment, and now the spotlight isn't going anywhere. As for the future, this might be the end of this chapter, but the game's only just getting started. Women's basketball is on the rise, and with players like Clark and Reese leading the charge, the next generation of stars is bound to keep shaking things up.